Welcome to the Performance Formula with Jody Martins. Akshay, officially welcome to the Performance Formula podcast. It is really, really awesome having you here.
Thank you. Honor to be here.
Yeah. I think most people wouldn't, that I especially deal with and that listen to the podcast, I'm not sure if they would know who you are, but I followed your, in my mind, spectacular journey last year.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that we'll get to learn from you, today around the things that you do and how you do it.
Absolutely.
So to start us off, what I want to ask is, what do you think it is that we can learn from you, and what's the best possible way that we do that in this conversation?
Great question. I think considering that you, from what I gather, your audience is coaches, parents, athletes. I have studied and lived and breathed the pursuit of mastery and peak performance for decades now. And my craft has varied from joining the military after overcoming a lifestyle of drug addiction, to running ultra marathons, to building a business, writing a book endorsed by the Dalai Lama, and then getting into outdoor adventures at a pretty extreme level, as you know, from climbing mountains to what I just attempted was the world's first attempt of this impossible expedition in Antarctica that literally pushed my body to the brink of death. So having explored some of the most extreme edges, I have developed some wisdom from these edges on how to push through hardship, how to reach the heights of peak performance while simultaneously achieving deeper depths of inner peace. And often they come at a contrast, and as I'm sure you've seen with athletes, it's one or the other. But I believe, and I've lived and I've supported others in achieving both. You can have both. And I believe that when you actually achieve greater depths of inner peace, it'll help you reach higher heights of peak performance as well.
That's an interesting idea and concept. I think sort of in my own life, I'm going through a little bit of a phase where I'm struggling with this a bit, right? I've had a sort of period where I could really recognize the importance of sort of finding that inner peace and what that brings, and the joy and the awesomeness that comes from that. But I feel like whenever I get into the grind, that tends to dissipate, right? That tends to go in the background. And I would say for a lot of athletes in particular that I've worked with, it certainly is the same thing, like performance and that sharp edge, that knife's edge that we can stand on from a performance point of view, in front of millions of people potentially, even if it's just a young sort of athlete growing up, the eyes and the expectations, that inner peace sort of gets lost completely.
Yeah, so I think let's start by then clarifying what exactly do we mean by inner peace, right? Because to a certain degree, there's a semantics conversation here, but maybe we all have different definitions, but here's mine. My inner peace to me and mental well-being does not mean a state without tension, a state without pressure, a state without anxiety, stress, certainly not. It's being able to manage that and control it and choose it at will. So as an athlete myself, I tap into every extreme state you can think of. So but the key is I have developed now the ability to do it consciously. So when I want to go into a place of rage, I use it. When I go through moments of stress, anxiety, pressure? Of course. But what I would define as inner peace is the ability to be the eye of the storm. So let's distinguish what I mean by that. Let's go a little deeper. So we as human beings, right, we all have an emotional experience. We all go through life, and we're going to be to some degree slaves to circumstance. So an athlete, I win, I feel great. I lose, I feel bad. Now, is that normal? Of course. I'm not suggesting you become numb and remove emotional experiences. That's not healthy as well. I've seen people become like zombies because they believe being detached, as some spiritual gurus will teach, is the path, and it is not the path. I would want you to feel sad when something bad happens. I want you to feel happy when something good happens. The key is you're not holding on to that emotional state as the definition of your identity and living in it. So I can experience an emotion but not be defined by that emotion. Because we are not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're not our experiences. We're the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, and the experiencer of our experiences. So when I lose, like I came back from Antarctica, for example, and I pushed my body to the brink of death. I attempted an impossible expedition that literally other adventurers were like, this is impossible, but I still wanted to complete it. I still wanted it, right? And I didn't. We can go into details if you'd like a little later of what happened, but I came back and I was upset. I was like an Olympic athlete. I trained for 4 years, didn't win the gold, so to speak. I was pissed off. I couldn't sleep, but I loved it. I want to be pissed off. I want to be angry because now that's fuel. I can tap into it. I can use it. I can say, I don't want to feel like this away. Again, what can I do differently? What did I learn? How can I channel that? So for an athlete listening, like, don't just rise up when you lose a game. Use that pain. Use that fuel. That's a place to go, but you're not living in it and you're not letting it consume your soul. You're experiencing it, but not being defined by it. I'll give you another example. When I wrote my book, Fearvana, I had reached out to the Dalai Lama to get an endorsement for my book. And when I did that, I was a nobody, no brand, no platform, complete unknown. Throughout that time, I had moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments of why would they endorse my book? Who am I? That big question that all of us face from time to time. But I was able to be with that emotion and still act in the face of it. So I still followed up. I still reached out. I still connected. I still took action. And ultimately, I got a forward from the Dalai Lama for my book, Fearvana. So I had an emotion, but wasn't defined by it. So to step back and bring it back to this dialogue of inner peace, it's the ability to be the master of your mind, not the slave to it. And that's what I mean. But I am not implying that you do not go through stress and tension, because those are valuable emotions. And anybody who denies it, you're going to suffer more if you try to resist that experience of life.
Sure. There's so much in what you say there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to maybe rewind a little bit too, because what you said there really caught my attention, right? We are not our thoughts. We are not our emotions. We are not. There was a third thing you said there. We are our experiences. We're the thinker of our thoughts. We're the
feeler of our feelings.
I feel like there's such a depth to that in the simplicity that you speak about, right? Because it leads to this age-old question, as you said, like, who are we? And I think if I think of myself, if I go through an experience, those emotions feel real to me. Yeah. The pressure somebody feels going into a performance, that can feel real. So what 100%. It sounds like is you make a complete separation between then yourself essentially and your thoughts, and that there's space between them.
Yeah. You want to be able to consciously dance between being fully in that visceral emotion, because again, all emotions are not there. Let's also step back and say and establish this key ingredient here. There are no bad emotions, there are no good emotions. There are only emotions, and it's up to us to choose what we do with them. And that's a foundational piece here, because if you deem an emotion as bad, you're going to resist it. You're going to try to even in subtle ways, you're going to want to make it go away. That's not helpful, right? So first, you want to accept the experience of every emotion as valuable. Once you do that, when you feel it, now it's a conscious dance between I'm going to allow myself to surrender to it, to immerse myself in it, to feel it fully without rising above that moment to feel it, and then choosing when I want to rise above it to not be defined by it. So, because again, there's value in being fully immersed in an emotion, in an experience. Like I mentioned, rage, right? When I'm in Antarctica, there was times in Antarctica, just to establish for somebody's listening, to give context, you are skiing in flat white nothingness. So it's flat terrain. I was dragging about a 400-pound sled, 420 initially, but it got lighter as it went. And you can't, like, there's no stimuli, no mountains, nothing. So for doing this for about 10 to 12 hours a day. So why is this so challenging? Because there's nothing to engage the mind. So your mind wanders. And this was the beautiful training ground to practice mastery of that mind. And I'm far from perfect at it, but I've gotten really good at being able to surrender. Okay, in this moment now, I want to feel rage. I would sometimes feel the pain of my brothers I've lost in combat. I was in the Marines. Other times feeling pure joy, thinking about my wife and my life back home and the life I want to create. But being able to consciously dance at that is a constant practice. Again, I'm not perfect, but I have gotten pretty damn good at it. And so, to your point, yes, an athlete, when they're feeling the pressure, that is real. That it's as visceral an experience as anything else, or whatever the emotion may be. But the key is being able to say, this is useful. I'm going to step in it fully. I'm going to use it. I'm going to choose to frame my fear as excitement, right? And I'll give you another example of this in a spiritual context. Buddha said we're all stabbed by the two darts of suffering. I go much deeper into this in my book, Fearvana, as well. So the first dart is the one we don't control. So it's when I'm in Antarctica, I feel pain in my leg. I have moments of doubt because we don't control most of what arises in our brain, right? We respond to external stimuli. If somebody comes into this room right now with a gun, I'm going to feel fear. I'm not choosing it. The second dart is what we do with it. So it's the dialogue. I should not feel this way. Why do bad things happen only to me? Who am I? God hates me. That inner dialogue we go through. The second darts of suffering are the real cause of suffering. The first darts we're all going to go through. That's part of the human experience. I'm going to get physically hurt. I'm going to get emotionally hurt. I'm going to get mentally hurt, all of it. But the second dart is the story we tell ourselves around it. And that's where you master that space between the two darts. You now eliminate that unnecessary suffering and you can channel your whatever the emotion may be. I mean, even guilt, for example, when I came back from the war, I struggled with survivor's guilt. When I was out there, my vehicle drove over an active bomb. It didn't explode. My friend's vehicle drove over an active bomb. It exploded. He died. Everybody told me, don't feel guilty. Emotionally, I get it. We can't control what happens. I mean, rationally, I get it. We can't control what happens in war. But emotionally, I still felt guilt. Why? Because guilt was an expression of love for my brother. Nobody told me that guilt was an expression of love because we deem it a quote unquote bad emotion. But I learned to use it. For a long time, I had a picture of my friend up on my wall, pasted up on my wall, and it said, this should have been you. Earn this life. So my guilt, it helped me sober up when I was drinking heavily after the war. It helped me write my book, Fearvana. It helped me build a business and get back into ultra endurance sports and the things that I do now. So every emotion is fuel when you consciously access it.
As I'm listening you speak to that, I'm sort of curious on your thinking around, maybe let me explain a little bit of my thinking, right? And then
Please.
Maybe that'll sort of texture, because I think you can add a important potential component for me, right? In the work that I do.
Yeah.
So I carry with me an idea and an understanding that performance comes from a place where, like, for the most part, we can't control performance, right? Like if I think of an athlete on a field, when they're on the field, it is an expression of the things they know, and it's an expression of their ability to unlock their skills, their learned abilities, etc., in that moment. And so when our mind goes into places where it's sort of, by way of some of your examples, that's self-talk, etc., that takes us into a place where we're not in a good space for performance, or it's not a healthy. So I refer to that as your condition. Almost, I think of it as like a Formula One car, right? You can fine tune that condition that you're in, and the condition includes all sorts of things: your preparation, your mind, body, emotional state, your intention. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that's included in that. And so, like, they can take that Formula One car and tweak it. We can learn to tweak our inner experience of things, our condition that we're in, and from that flows our performance. And what tends to happen is we tend to not set up the car right. We set it up in sort of a wrong or wonky way, and then performance doesn't flow quite naturally. But when I hear you talk, so one of the ingredients in my understanding of this is emotion, right? It's that mind, body, emotional experience that we're busy having. And what I'm hearing you talk about is that you can use any emotion as fuel. And so I'm curious how you think about sort of potentially, say, an idea like the idea I have, that there's this condition that you need to be in, but that it can be, because I would normally say, okay, well, if you need to be calm in performance, if that's something you understand about yourself, then go and be calm. But what you're explaining is, well, sometimes you might feel rage, or sometimes you might feel guilt. And so I'm trying to maybe understand how you think about.
Yeah, great point. So the key is you want to, this is not to say that everybody should feel guilt or rage. It's you want to find the playgrounds you play in as vehicles to access. We all have our own internal life experience. That's why that pursuit of mastery, there's meta level principles that are same, but the way you apply those principles are unique and individual to each person. Because, like, take a great example as a pre-game ritual. Michael Phelps used to be super intense, eye of the tiger, listening to music, getting in the zone. Usain Bolt used to be playful, joking, doing his little pose that he does, right? Two people who are the best in the world at what they do, but very different modes to get there. But what's the universal element in there? They kind of had a pre-game ritual, if you will. So the point is not to say my emotions are the emotions. The point is, and it's also going to be a little different based on the sport. Like my sport in polar travel, you are skiing in flat white nothingness. Your mind is going to wander. If you're downhill skiing, your mind is not going to wander. Your mind is going to be much more in flow. And to your point, if you have that dialogue, you're in a bad way. There's going to be no dialogue. And I've experienced that. Even, for example, when I climb mountains, I'm on a thin ridge line, 1,000-foot drop on each side. My mind's not, there is no dialogue. I'm fully in flow, right? I'm in the moment. So this will be somewhat sport specific. If you take a look like golf, for example, after each shot, you're going to be walking to the next. So there's a lot more time to pause and think. So there's that inner mastery. Whereas a faster paced sport, there's not even going to be that time, right? You're just in the throes of it because there's a little bit more of a rush. To your point, that this is not to say you want to be in inner dialogue. Like the great performers, they're not thinking, and thinking is actually what has them choke, right? You want to surrender to your subconscious because that's where mastery lies. For the greats, they have mastered it to the degree that it is subconscious, and the subconscious works faster than the conscious mind. The point is to get to that state of that full flow, whatever your craft is. The mechanisms there, the tools there are going to be unique to each individual. And emotional places can be valuable. Like Tom Brady used rage, right? He used anger. Anger was fuel to him. Does every athlete? No, because you want to find the tools that are unique to you. And I'm sure you do this in your work. When I work with people too, I find, like, I worked with one kid who's now the youngest NASCAR driver ever. And same thing, this kid was a lot more playful in his pregame ritual. He didn't need to go eye of the tiger. So the goal was, I don't care like what you do. You don't have to do what I do, but find what works for you. And then applying these meta level principles to get you in your state and tapping into the principle there again is you want to tap into both your darkness and your light. So we all have things that have happened to us. And if you try to escape that darkness and say, this is not the place I want to go, you're not helping yourself. You want to use it. So in my case, again, the darkness is the guilt, it's the rage, it's the pain from the war. But that's not the only place I live in. I live in gratitude. I live in bliss. I live in celebration of the human experience, life, right? But the more you become conscious of this, you can dance in whichever arena you choose to dance in each moment to serve you and access that state of your subconscious that you can surrender to be in pure isness of the moment.
Yeah, it reminds me of a fast bowler in cricket that has to get angry. If he's not angry, then you must probably see like a little bit of a half a version of him. He's not showing up completely fully. Or you'll hear stories of, I just finished reading a book of a cricketer where he speaks of, he had to like get into a battle. There had to be some fight. And so he had to learn, when he understood this about himself, that he needed a fight. He had to learn that if there wasn't an actual battle on the field, how he maybe creates a battle within himself.
Yeah.
Because that could also help, right?
Yeah.
Some point to prove, or whether the point was there to prove or not, but in this game or in this moment, let me prove this point. And so that gets the best out of him, which then speaks a lot. And this comes up in the podcast a lot. And I think the reason I like talking about this is because I have a perception that a lot of people aren't very self-aware. And I think we all, to a degree, there's elements of self-awareness that we don't yet have until until in some weird way we discover that, right?
Yeah.
And I can imagine that if you're out there in Antarctica, I mean, I'd say the closest thing that I've ever done in my life that really pushed my boundaries in this way is I went on a 10-day silent retreat. It's maybe not nearly as extreme as going into Antarctica.
No, but that's...
There's not 4 years of preparations. It was a spur of the moment decision, which followed by a lot of fear, like, shucks, what's actually going to happen if I get quiet with my own thoughts and I have to go sit there, and I got nothing, no pen, no paper. And that's like sitting here with my notebook, right? That's all these things that you hold on to. All of that stripped away, and I'm going to not talk, and I'm going to just be there with myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that through doing things like that, I at least got the sense I understood myself more.
I completely agree. Yeah, I did 17 days in darkness. So 7 days the first time, and a 10-day darkness retreat, just sitting still in complete darkness to go within. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful experience. So challenging, but beautiful.
What would you say to people that don't push their boundaries in these sort of ways, right? How in normal everyday life do we get more self-aware? Because if there isn't self-awareness, then I think a lot of the conversations and the work I do fall by the wayside, because you can't really effectively work with yourself if you're not aware of yourself.
You don't know yourself. Exactly. Yeah, to your point, you don't have to go to 10 days of silence or 10 days of a darkness retreat, but go for sitting. Like, I had one kid who was so inspired that about my darkness retreat, he locked himself in a dark closet for an hour and just sat still with himself. So you can start there, go for a 1 hour walk with no music. Go for then build up. Do for a 10-hour walk with no music. Do a 10-hour sitting. I did this to celebrate my birthday a few years ago. I always do hard things to celebrate my birthday, but I did 10 hours of meditation and 10 hours of tire dragging on a full day, 24 hours, no sleep, no food. So 10 hours of meditation, 10 hours of dragging tires very slowly, you go within. Again, you don't have to do something that extreme, but you can find ways to just sit still with yourself and allow things to rise to the surface. Because if you don't, as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So for athletes, for anybody really, you're going within to access and to seize control of these forces within you, to use them as weapons as opposed to being slaves to them. And that's, to your point of the self-awareness, is making that unconscious conscious so you can use it. That's what it's all about. Like, that's why I went in the darkness the second time, 10 days, to train for Antarctica. I wanted to go deeper within to access whatever spaces within myself. Now this becomes a mental tool that I can access, that I can, and even creating the person that I want to be, sitting still in the darkness within myself, right? Because every moment we are both being and becoming, and those dualities coexist. But if you embrace the fact that those dualities coexist, you can choose who you are becoming moment to moment to moment. And that's where the mastery lies.
I mean, we've got a friend, and him and I spent a lot of time on the podcast here talking about exactly this, right? We have a sense that a lot of athletes play for the goal. They play for the trophy. They play for the career. They play for the money. They play for the fame. They play for the status. And it's not saying that you're not allowed to have that. It's not saying that. But our sense is that a lot of the time they miss exactly this idea that it's more about the becoming. It's more about how the things you engage with defines who you are becoming as a person, how you're growing, how you're evolving, rather than saying, I am the person I am because I have these things, like I have fame, I have success, and therefore I know who I am.
Yeah. And that's the paradox of athletic mastery, is the less you focus on the victory, the more you actually get the victory. There's a great quote from Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest in the world, and I think one who truly embodies. Now, in his younger years, we all have flaws. We're all gone through human experience. But if you look at him towards his end of his years, he was not only the greatest, but also achieved what I would call a high degree of inner peace. Like, take when he retired. Everybody told him, oh, you're going to struggle with retirement. He's like, no, I'm fine. And then went out and won an Oscar, right? So, so legendary, because he wasn't phased by, his identity wasn't defined by the victories. They were defined by the pursuit, by the curiosity, by the learning. And there's a great quote from him where he says, I can't remember the exact quote, but he's like, those nights where you wake, you're still training, the mornings where you wake up early to train, the fight, the grind, that's actually the dream, not the trophies. And that's the key. That's the key for an athlete. And look, I get it. We all want victories, right? If you're an athlete, of course you want to win. It's not to say Kobe did not win championships. Of course you do. But the paradox is that the more you focus on the championships, the less likely you are to win it. Because to your point, you can't control that. You can't control what happens, even in Antarctica. And look, again, I had my moments of wanting to hit a certain distance, but I couldn't control it. If I got hit with soft snow, which I did a lot, I could work my ass off dragging 400 pounds through soft snow, but there's just no chance I'm hitting that distance that day in the 10 hours and 11 hours. You can't control what my GPS is going to say at the end of the day. But what I can control is the next step and how my mind chooses to respond to the next step. So the more you bring your mind into the now, into the fight, into the grind, it becomes your identity is one not who's about the championships, but one who's about the work. Right? My identity is that I love being someone who thrives in the work. You're attaching your self-esteem to. This is also how athletes build confidence, because when you are an athlete, before you've got all the championships and the victories, there is no belief there's no evidence to justify that you're great, right? That's why a great athlete has to be irrational and delusional. There's no evidence to justify. How do you get that evidence? You attach your self-identity and your self-esteem and your confidence to the work. And the more you attach it to the work, the more you can build that irrational belief that I am the greatest that's ever lived. And you have to have that irrational belief, right? So let's say I get out today and I train my ass off and I go to bed absolutely exhausted. And I do it again the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day. 1 month down the road, I have 30 days of evidence that shows I'm the hardest worker alive. Now I can cultivate that because I've attached my identity to the work. not to the result. And the more you do that, the better you get, and the more likely you are to get the results that you actually want.
Yeah. Because then things like your visualization would match that, your self-talk can start matching that. You're not sort of living inauthentically, right? And that's something that I've really picked up from you, maybe even more so than I feel like I do in my own life, right? Is that I get the sense that Akshay is like really, really authentic. Like if I look at what you sort of post on social media, how you posted your workouts, what you're doing, I really get a sense that there's a realness to all of it. Like it's not a show that you're putting on, or
Appreciate you calling me that. Thank you.
Just doing it for, I don't know, for other people. Like I think if there was no social media, none of the stuff, you'd be doing exactly the same. That's sort
Very
of
much so.
That's very much my sense I get.
Thank you. Appreciate you saying that.
So what was kind of cool, and you mentioned it with your journey last year. So as I was following along, I was seeing your posts and I was listening to your audios that you shared and sort of talking about, I'm not reaching my milestone. What was like your darkest moment out there in this whiteness, essentially?
Yeah. There was many.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, that's the beauty about what these experiences I love is the highs are so high, the lows are so low, but you experience the range of the human condition in this microcosm of time. But some of the darker moments were just towards the end, especially when I was just going through a tremendous amount of pain, the body breaking down. And I mean, because I had 4 days out there where I crossed 20 kilometers for the day, a distance I really needed, a milestone. And then that night it would snow. First time this happened, I hit 21.9 kilometers. It was day 20. And then it snowed so much, my kilometers went from 21 to 17 to 14 to 13 while doing the same amount of hours. So not only was my distances dropping, it was taking a greater toll on the body because it was just so hard. And the frustration of that, and this was early in the journey, and I'm trying to do something that's never been attempted before, let alone accomplished, never even been attempted because it was so hard. And here you are fighting with all your might, and you're just not getting the results. And more, it's looking less likely to be possible. And about day 48, we knew now that the complete crossing was no longer possible. Just to give context, what I was attempting to do was to complete the world's first coast-to-coast ski crossing of Antarctica without dogs or kites. So a 190 kilo, so 420 pound sled for 1,750 miles, about 2,700 kilometers for 115 days completely alone. Day 48, it was very clear that I couldn't, the distance was too big in the remaining time I had left. But day 50 through 60, my last 10 days out there, I was going through leg pain. I mean, chest pain, spine pain, dizziness, days where I felt like I was drunk and stumbling and falling over. Other days where I couldn't catch my breath. Even after 2 steps, it felt like I was sprinting, and just everything was breaking down. And the lows of that, let alone the physical pain, but the mental pain, the frustration, because I was still out there fighting, And then day 58, I ended up getting diverticulitis, which is shooting, like the pain in the gut was quite severe. It's infection in the colon that if you don't treat it with medicine and rest, it can burst, get septic, and kill you, which is what happened to an adventurer 8 years ago. So I pushed the body to the very, very, very edge. And day 60 got evacuated. But in those last 10 days of those dark moments, and even earlier on, when some of those hard days that I was struggling and I was breaking 20 kilometers, I would once again have hope that I could pull this off, and then it would snow and struggling with that. But and I had low moments, but allowing yourself to be okay with that. Like coming back to the point I made earlier, it's okay to have those low moments. Not feeling them would be ridiculous. But then once again, it's fuel. It brings you back into the now. That's part of the joy for me. Is the test is those low moments. I mean, I had so many days where I could have quit knowing that this was impossible, beyond hope. But I still chose to stay fighting until literally the body broke and was on the brink of death. That to me is a victory. Did I still want that crossing? Hell yes. But there is a victory that the body broke before the mind did. So just in those low moments, I mean, my wife was an invaluable support. I would call her through the satellite phone and she would guide me through. And I'm one who does not complain, like just genuinely speaking, no matter how bad things are, I'm like, I'm good, I'm fine. But there were 2 days out there where even me, like my wife was like, she was like, how you doing? And I was like, I'm not good. I've been better. So when I say that, she knows like, holy shit, that's something up. But those moments, the key is, all right, what can I control here? Let me bring it back. The days when I would wake up and I would see outside my tent that there's snow out there. So now today's going to suck. It's going to be incredibly hard, and you got to do this shit for 9 hours. But there it is. Bring it back. One little mantra of mine became, and I think every athlete can use this, is recognizing that in every moment, one version of you is dying. every moment. So the version that I was this morning, it will never exist in history ever again. So when it hit me in this realization that every day there's a version of me dying, I am going to choose to die alive. This became a mantra: die alive. So living, it's not so much like living every day as if it's your last, but living every day as if it's your entire life. So this moment, this day, this hour, it is my entire life. And I'm going to choose it living the highest. This is coming back to also knowing who you are. My virtues, my honor, the values that I embody are integrity, honor, right? Like, so choosing to be that. I'm going to be in integrity with myself. Even nobody's watching out there, right? I was as alone as a human being could be, but I'm going to be the person I choose to be by my standards. So on that day when I don't get out of my tent, imagine now if I did not get out of that tent that one day. Today, I would live with that shit for the rest of my life. Live with it for the rest of my life. So recognizing not only this mantra of die alive, but every moment there's a decision that defines our entire destiny. Like the rest of my life I would live with that shit if I knew that if I quit, if I didn't get out of the tent. But today I can look back on that journey and be damn proud that I didn't have those days, right? I didn't want to, but I got out anyway. Recognizing this die alive, remember tomorrow, these certain mantras became fuel to push me through hard moments and just bring me back into the now. The only thing I control is, all right, let me just pack my tent. I'm going to remember tomorrow, and I'm going to choose to go forward in the now, living in alignment with the values that I embody. But that's why one of the things, it sounds like you do this as well, is with athletes, is working with getting clear on who you are. What are those emotions that drive you? What are the values that drive you? Then you can weaponize it, because I'm not saying use my weapons, use your own weapons, right? That's the key.
Is there a way that you use to find your values, or is that something that you just aware of naturally? Is there some specific, is it because of you doing certain things that you became aware of them, or is it a conscious choice you make about them?
It's been cultivated over time. I certainly wasn't always this self-aware or anything, right? I was a dumbass kid doing a lot of drugs before I joined the Marines, things like that. So it built over time, and then you crystallize it. You can write it down, and then you recognize maybe when you change, the values change. Now I'm at a point that they're very aligned, like self-transcendence so that others may live is the core value. So when I'm really struggling, remembering this is about something bigger than me, that I have to honor my brothers that died. I have to honor life itself. There are people suffering who have suffered way more than I get to choose my suffering. That's a luxury many in the world do not have, right? I've worked with survivors of sex trafficking, former child soldiers, been to war zones, seen people in the darkest corners of hell, and recognizing that. So that becomes a value, that this is not about me and my suffering, but that's a place for me to go. Was that going to work for everybody? No. But again, that's for me, right? Even honor, integrity as a Marine. Like there was a day out there where, so there was one guy who had skied in front of me. He was doing a kind of a shorter route, still a very challenging route, but his tracks were in front of me and I could see his tracks. And if I used his tracks in the soft snow, it would have made life much easier. Nobody would have ever known I would have used his tracks. Nobody would have ever known. I was completely alone. But I chose not to. Like, what a gift, what an opportunity, And I would talk to my wife about this, and I was like, I would rather die. I would then use those tracks. I don't care how soft the snow is, how hard the work is, especially when I was going uphill. Like, I would be going up steep hills and see his tracks right next to me. That if I go on his tracks, it's going to be so much easier going up that hill. But what an opportunity to be tested on your virtues, right? Especially when no one's watching. But you have to know those virtues. So it built over time to say that honor, integrity are mine. I don't give a shit if anybody's watching. This is who I choose to be. But I would recommend athletes start getting clear on that and at least start writing it down. And yes, they can evolve over time, but eventually you become a person that will know that this is what you stand by and who you are and who you live by. And yes, of course, we grow and we change, but now I've done this work enough that I don't see my values changing. I'll evolve of course, in subtle ways, right? As you know, with athletes, the greater you are at your craft, the changes are smaller. It's a 1% edge, not a 50% difference, right? Earlier on in your path, the growth's much more exponential, but when you're higher on whatever the journey, the craft, the fixes, the changes are much smaller. And that's kind of on my journey where I've been blessed to have attained those heights right now.
Did you make like a specific choice in your life, right? Because I'm hearing you speak about having done drugs at one point in time, then joining the Marines. Was there a moment where you made a choice about turning your life in this direction, or was that just organic?
To join the Marines, actually, the movie Black Hawk Down was the trigger that changed my life. I don't know. Have you seen the movie?
I think I might have,
A long
but
time
I
ago.
don't. I have a terrible memory when it
All
comes to
good.
movies. I
All
can
good.
watch them again and again and again, and I
And you're
will
like,
not
it's a new
remember them.
movie. It's perfect.
Yeah,
It's a
it's a
new
new
movie
movie.
every time. Exactly. So, but so I've made a series to answer the question, a series of choices. Like that was the trigger that planted a seed that got me out of drugs into the Marines. I was at one point wanted to go career Marines. That path changed, and then I was like trying to figure out, okay, who do I want to be? What do I want to be now? And then started building a business, made a choice, and now I've gotten clarity on what's my philosophy, what's my values, what's my mission, the ethos, the guide, the North Star. But it developed over time. Some people, like greatest athletes, Kobe started playing basketball when he was 5. Tiger Woods started playing golf when he was 3 or something ridiculous, right? So some people figure it out early, and if you have, awesome. If you haven't, that's also cool. Like I have no regrets. I've had tremendous life experiences, but now there's clarity on, I would say it developed, I think in the last 8 years, the North Star became pretty crystal clear. And that's been the path that I'm on. Like my mission, sort of the larger, the way I think about it is, what are words you would want written on your tombstone about you? That becomes your true North Star. That's beyond the constructs of the things we do, because an athlete is going to eventually retire. But if you get clarity on your ultimate North Star, then everything you're doing is feeding into that. So for me, it's based on this Carl Jung quote. He wandered the world with human heart to doctor the sick with human soul. That's like what I would want on my tombstone, for example, right? So is everything I'm doing living in alignment with that? Today it is, but it certainly wasn't, right? But I had to get clear on that. And so that becomes the North Star. Then you have your philosophy statement, which is kind of how you live that path. Like my philosophy statement is, the path to inner peace is the pursuit of a worthy inner war. That becomes your North Star. So I'm finding an inner war. The inner war is whatever. Everybody's got an inner war. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're playing the guitar, whether you're building a business, there's an inner war. Whether you're doing nothing, you're going to go through an inner war. So my point is finding a worthy inner war, right? So that's become the philosophy statement. Then you have your values. But when you get crystal clear on this, it guides you into greater heights of peak performance, because you can then leverage all those things as weapons, but also deeper depths of inner peace, because you know who you are and you're not a slave to the world around you.
I'm sort of getting this idea, and I'm hoping that the people that listen, especially if it's like parents and athletes, maybe more so, but even to us coaches, right? I'm really getting a sense that often on the podcast I have guests on, and we sort of speak and we say, yeah, well, it takes work. It takes inner work, right? And then we don't necessarily always get clarity on what that work is in a conversation. And I'd like to think that you've shone kind of a huge amount of light into that area, right? You're clear on your vision, you're clear on your values, you have a philosophy statement in place. And I'm sure there's more, right? But it just shows that the work you do from an inner point of view leads to some clarity that you have about yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which is essentially then that becoming piece that we spoke about. And then you perform or you act in life and in your performances from the inside out rather than from the outside in, because you have this clarity that you say, okay, cool, this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table, and this is what I contribute.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where a lot of, no, you can go.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say, but a lot of athletes sort of do the reverse of that, or coaches, or we do the reverse of that. I think sometimes I do that too, right? Even though I have this understanding of it, is that we attach that sense of ourself to the things on the outside. I have this house, I have this car, I'm living here, I'm earning this salary, I'm playing at this level, or I'm achieving, and then when we don't have those things, it becomes like an identity crisis.
Exactly.
We break down because we don't have a sort of solid foundation to stand on.
Exactly. But if you attach your values, your identities, your constructs of yourself to that inner work, it doesn't matter what's happening outside, because you can control that part, right? You can control what's happening, who you choose to be. So I think starting with that is such a foundational place. And look, if you're a new young athlete, like you see this happen a lot, they suddenly get into NFL or whatever, NBA, and they're making a lot of money and they're crushing. And I get it. We're all human beings. Suddenly you've got a lot of money, you're going to want to spend it, all those things, and live it up a little bit. But I think every great athlete will eventually see, all right, wait, this is something I'm missing here, and then the inner work happens. And look, it happened for me way later. I'm 40 years old now. I kind of got clarity when I was about 33, 34. So this was not like, it took a lot to get to this point. But the sooner you start there, the more you're actually going to get those results you want, and just enjoy the ride more, find greater peace more. A kind of a key framework, and I think this could be a helpful way to go here too, is to that has guided me and the people I work with, and I think will guide athletes and coaches, is this recognition that the entire human experience is this dance of opposites. So there's life and death, light and dark, pain and pleasure, ego, humility, control, surrender. And what I have found over time, this now what I call the paradox of oneness. The paradox of oneness is the realization that these two opposites are not in fact opposites, but two expressions of the same whole. And you find peace, freedom, and mastery by no longer resisting or clinging to either edge of every opposite, but actually accepting every edge and embracing every edge. And then the next level is actually exploring every edge as the pathway to your evolution. So I'll go a little deeper into what I mean by this. There's everybody here, we struggle with certain duality, and I've seen this over time. Every problem that I have seen people struggle with stems from some version of dualistic thinking. So in the spiritual world, for example, they will demonize will and idolize surrender. If you look at the duality of will and surrender, right? And again, we don't need to get caught in the semantics. You can call it whatever you want, but willpower, fight, control, and surrender. Now, in the spiritual world, they'll be like, you just surrender to everything, and willpower is demonized. But in the peak performance athlete world, and even peak performance in business, they idolize will and demonize surrender.
Yeah,
and
true.
It's the demonization of either side of any duality that will cause you more pain. When you actually stop resisting or clinging, because all secondary suffering, all unnecessary suffering is caused by resisting or clinging to anything, to a thought, to a feeling, to one edge of every duality. But when you stop resisting or clinging, you find greater freedom. And I'll give you another very concrete example of what this means for me. So many years ago, I was out running and I saw a sign that said 5K fun run. And I had visceral disgust at the idea of a fun run. Like, you don't run for fun. I had a paradigm that every run has to be an exercise in suffering. Every moment in training, I have to suffer. And if I'm not suffering, I'm wrong. Now, this was an unhealthy way to live. Through self-awareness, I started to see that I'm bringing in suffering in all areas of my life. So if you look at the duality of play and suffering, or pain and pleasure, however you want to define it, I started playing. I looked for a duality causing me friction. At the time, it was this. And I started playing on the other edge of this duality. So I started doing more things for fun. When I was in the car, I'd be rocking out, singing, dancing, light, playful, going for runs without my watch, without measuring heart rate, just to have fun with it, just to be silly. And by playing on the edge of fun, I opened up new doors that weren't available to me if I was staying within my constructs and paradigms. Now, look, if you take the duality of pain and pleasure, I'm always going to be someone who flirts more with the edge of the duality of pain, on that particular duality. But by playing on the edge of pleasure, I've now gotten not only two new tools, new mental weapons to thrive on the edge of pain, I've opened new doors that weren't otherwise open that allow me to become better at my craft. Coming back to athletes, we talked about this earlier, right? Like tying a ribbon and all this, about surrendering to the moment, surrendering to the flow, surrendering to the subconscious. If you demonize surrender, you're missing an access point to something great. But if you demonize will, you are doing the same thing. Another great example is ego and humility. I think this one is particularly relevant for athletes. The new athletes will struggle with ego. Great athletes like the Tom Brady's, the Kobe Bryant's of the world, you listen to them talk, they'll be like, I am the greatest. I'm the greatest that's ever lived. Ronaldo, all these guys, and they have to be. But when sometimes people see this, I'll hear people say, "Oh, they're arrogant." They're not arrogant. You have to have ego to be great. I had to believe I was legendary to even attempt what I attempted. But the greatest athletes in the world, you can see this duality coexisting, of ego and humility coexisting. They will know they are legends and the greatest, and they believe it with all their might, as they should. But they have the humility to constantly be looking for gaps. Where can I learn? Who can I learn from? The world is their library. They look for coaches, mental coaches, physical coaches. I spoke to Larry Fitzgerald, one of the greatest footballers of all time in his particular zone of football, and I asked him, what is it that separates people like you, people like the Kobe Bryants of the world, from everywhere else? Because it takes a lot just to get to the NBA or cricket or whatever the sport may be. But to be the greats among the greats, what is it that separates? And universally, when I've seen this, the answer is they're still looking for their mistakes. They're still looking for weaknesses. Whereas other people who are great, they're like, I'm the hot shit. I don't need to learn from anybody, right? So ego and humility is a core duality that, especially for athletes, is so relevant. But again, there's a series of dualities that encompass the human experience. And in my life, I'm always looking for a duality causing me friction, and I'll go play on the other edge of it. And that reaches higher heights of mastery as well as inner peace.
Sure. I had a thought. So I'm going to mention two things. The first one's just a random thought.
Yeah.
what you mentioned about the elite athletes, maybe that play between I'm the greatest, right, and the humility is you'll also always hear them talk about team.
Yes.
They're never so full of themselves that they'll always sort of make team and the we-ness of their sport, right?
Yeah.
They will make that super important, and they're very open about that too. So it's not I'm the greatest, just look at me, look at me, look at me.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're not vain in that sense. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to that point, I'll just jump on that.
Now I lost my second thought.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
But if it comes up, at one point I'll jump on that, which I love that you pointed that out, is when you have a deep knowing from the core of your soul about who you are, what you're capable of, what you stand for, how great you are, you actually become more humble because you don't need to prove it. To your point, you don't need to be vain. You don't need to show it. It's just embedded. And that's why the true greats, like the greatest of the greats, to your point, it's not about me. It's about the team. And they don't need to be like, look, everybody look at me, because they don't care. Because it's coming from within. It's not, I don't give a shit what the other person thinks about me, right? That's coming back to the core of it, is knowing who you are. Because then it's not a thought of who you are. There's a distinction between thought and knowing. There's a big space. It's a giant chasm between thought and knowing.
Can we throw belief in there? And then I'd like to hear your perception of that. So because to me, there's a difference between thought, belief, and knowing. They're all different.
Yeah, good distinction. How would you distinguish between? Sorry, I mean, I'm happy to answer the question, but it made me curious about how you would. Yeah.
So to me, thoughts are not things that we can control. They come and they go.
Yeah.
The way I think about it, there's a little machine in your head that sort of just churns them out, and it's your brain sort of reaction to stimuli. Really, it's a running sort of thing. Beliefs are thoughts we validated as true for ourselves.
Great. Yeah.
So if I'm thinking a thought over and over again, and I start seeing the evidence for that, then I can go, oh, okay, yeah, I can start believing that.
Yeah.
That is true, right?
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, if there's belief, there's doubt. Because in order to believe something, okay, yes, this thought, I need the evidence. So if the evidence is no longer there, well, then I'll start doubting it. Then I'll start going, okay, hang on, can I still believe that? When knowing to me is solid.
Yeah, I love
there's
that.
There's a certainty about it. There's and so that's why I think this idea of knowing yourself speaks so much to me, is because if you know yourself, then it's not, oh, I believe something about myself. I don't need to go look for the evidence, right? There's a firmness and a certainty and a clarity around that. Yeah.
It's embodied in the way you show up in the world, in your subconscious. I love that scene in The Matrix where Morpheus tells Neo, you're faster than this. Don't think you are. Know you are. Right? He had to know that he is the one to become the one. Not think it, not believe it, to your point, but it becomes a knowing. And it is a progression, just as you said, right? Initially, wherever you are, if somebody's just starting out on the journey to mastery, there's going to be tons of thoughts. You're going to be a slave to them. It's going to be chaotic. And I even say that you don't initially, this is if you're very early on in the path, you don't need to believe in yourself. You don't need to believe. You just need to go to war with yourself. And belief is built on the battlefield. But now, as you evolve on the path to mastery, then you stack up that evidence and you start believing. And then the more that belief becomes embedded through the evidence, through the doing, through the moving through the human experience with these patterns, it then becomes a knowing, right? I wasn't like this always, right? Now there's a knowing, but it gets cultivated over relentless hours of grinding at your craft and choosing to do the work both mentally and physically, like the embodied work and the inner work, and both those coexist to create the knowing. And the greatest athletes, I think, embody that. That's why you see they don't need to show how great they are. It's embodied. And they talk about their team because it is about the team, because they're not, you don't need to look at me, look at everybody. We're all great, like it's not a everybody's look at me and I'm awesome kind of thing. I love the way you distinguish those three. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You've done more than just Antarctica, right? And you've pushed, and there's You've sort of mentioned pain a little bit earlier. A lot of people shy away from it. I think myself included.
Yeah.
I hurt my lower back when I was 15 for the first time. And since then, it's just always been a bit of a journey with me and my back. So when I feel pain, I would almost like stop certain things. But you don't approach it, I think, in that sort of a way, right? I mean, pushing your body to a point, I get that it was in the service of achieving something big. It's not like every day you go out and you push your body to the point of almost dying, right? It's not a daily occurrence. But I'm curious what your relationship with pain is. In as much as your relationship with fear, I think you've sort of described that in quite a lot of detail. But yeah.
I think you got to be willing to go into deeper depths of pain to know greater heights of joy. Coming back to the paradox of oneness, the duality of the human experience, I think people are so scared to leap off the edge, whatever the edge may be, for fear they'll fall and hurt themselves, that they never truly live the heights of joy, the heights of awe. And that's what it was Henry David Thoreau who said most men, and I would argue most people, live lives of quiet desperation. But you have to be willing to risk pain. I mean, I have gone through the edge. I've gotten heat exhaustion, hypothermia. I've lost 2 fingers to frostbite. So I've put myself on the edge many times. And sure, you get hurt, and not just physically. I mean, even in a relationship, you got to put yourself out there to meet the girl, meet the guy, whatever it may be, right? And you're going to get rejected. People are going to say no to you, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to suck. But you got to go through both physical, mental, emotional, all kinds of pain to know the greater heights of joy. So that's why for me, I had gotten so comfortable with pain that my edge became joy, right? This is coming back to playing on the sacred edge of whatever your edge is. Your edge is different than my edge and anybody else's edge. But through self-awareness, you find what is your sacred edge. I call it the sacred edge, right? That's the sacred place for you to go. And I talk a lot about, if you follow me on social media, suffering and pain, and because that's the harder thing. The inherent nature of suffering and pain is that it's hard. It's not comfortable. It's easier to be comfortable. It's obviously, right? So that's why I stress that. But the point is to say that I'm not saying only do that. Like, I value, that's why I think even now in this world of sort of masculine energy, we've got comfort as the enemy. But that's nonsense. Like, comfort is not the enemy. Too much comfort is, but comfort is valuable because there's discomfort, and vice versa. So the key is finding your sacred edge and being willing to go there one step at a time, and obviously do it smart. Like, if it's an injury, you're not going to, like a spine injury, like that's a different thing, right? Like, you know where the different distinction is between injury, like a lifetime injury, versus, all right, I'm gonna hurt a little bit. Like, I knew in Antarctica from day one I was in pain. Day one, the entire 60 days, something was hurting. But there was a distinction between that pain versus, all right, now I'm on the cusp of death pain, right? It's time to stop, right? I could have kept going, and things would have gotten much worse, potentially fatal. So knowing that, of course, you exercise this with prudence and intelligence, but the key is about being willing to go onto the sacred edge, and that sacred edge could be joy for you, and then it's painful. Like, I would struggle more dancing and doing light, playful things than doing 100 burpees in a corner, because my sacred edge was the light, And so struggle is not just struggle in the conventional way we think about it. It could be light, it could be playful, it could be joy. But you got to know yourself to go figure out what your sacred edge is. And that's one of the things I do with people I work with, is figuring out what is your sacred edge, and let's go there to evolve.
Yeah, I don't think I've thought about it like that, to be perfectly honest. My sense of it would normally be that the pain and struggle, maybe it's because that is my sacred edge would be more then potentially to that side rather than the joy and the lighter side, But I can certainly see, and in the same way, potentially comfort, could do the same thing for some people. There's some people that are just never give themselves time to be comfortable. There's others that are just so much in the comfort that is actually their pain.
And I think for most people, they're too much in the comfort. There's something that's to great athletes. Like, they play on the duality of both recovery and stress, comfort and discomfort, however you want to label it. The best athletes in the world spend more time, I would argue, on recovery. LeBron James spends millions of dollars on his recovery because they know the value of that. You're not going to get great by just stressing yourself out all the time. They know, and even I used to be terrible at this. Like, one of my fitness mentors, he says, if you can't commit to the recovery, don't commit to the training. And so this comes back to the duality. Like, a great athlete wants to be able to embrace comfort in the sense of recovery, because that's going to make you better at your craft. But I think most people in the regular world, they struggle more with comfort than with discomfort.
Yeah.
But Kobe was the opposite. His trainer had to encourage him to sleep and do recovery, because that man could work like nobody else, right? So his edge was actually comfort. Or recovery, however you want to word it.
Yeah. Akshay, I've loved this conversation, eh?
Thank you, brother. Likewise.
Every single part of sort of what you have to offer, your whole journey, your whole experience, your openness and willingness to talk about all of these things has been phenomenal to be a part of. It's been phenomenal to have you, yeah.
Likewise.
If people sort of listen to this and they want to connect with you, see more about what you do, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
You can find the book Fearvana on Amazon, paperback, Kindle, Audible, and my social media. I'm on Instagram. My website is Fearvana. Instagram at Fearvana, Fearvana.
Yeah, I'll make sure all of that sits in the links
Awesome.
below.
Thank you, brother. This was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Loved it too. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
You too.
Welcome to the Performance Formula with Jody Martins.